Good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is February 9th, year 2021. I am your guide to the outer limits, Professor Hamamoto, otherwise known as the George Carlin of academia. And let me be the first to wish you a happy Valentine's Day. We love Valentine's Day so much, I think we should start celebrating now. In the aftermath of the super irritable bowel, we have something to look forward to this weekend. I know you do, I do. And we're going to have fun with that despite the efforts, the best efforts of the joy killers out there and the scientists, the behavioral scientists, these so-called educators who do whatever is in their power, which is fairly substantial. We're going to talk about some of the manifestations of scientific power, including social scientific power, in this talk today. But they do what they can in order to be sort of like Lucy. We're about ready to kick the ball and they just keep pulling it away from us at the very last moment. If you want to use a cheesy Peanuts analogy, and by the way, I never really understood which character was Peanuts. I know about Linus and Charlie Brown and Pigpen and all the other people, but I could never figure out who Peanuts was. So today I'm going to be talking about the American/Prussian invention of what I call Pan-Sexuality. And so far as I know, your guide, your host to the outer limits today, the George Carlin of academia, Professor Hamamoto, has coined a new phrase. He has innovated, as he has time and time again at the University of California, Davis. And I mention that because we're going to be returning to the scene of the crime sometime during the course of this talk here, because they've been very much part of this re-engineering of humanity, of the natural world, and replacing it with an artificial engineered environment down to the molecular level. They even have a new, well, it's not so new, but it's out in the open now. They call it synthetic biology, right? So I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to talk about and I notice here, American, you know this, if you're watching this show, you've already graduated beyond all the Freemasonic and then blah, 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 woof, woof typo. Yeah, supernatural, the occult, eyes wide shut, blah, blah, Stanley Kubrick. All that stuff. You've seen that. I saw it 10, 15, 20 years ago. I read it. And so those of you who are here know that the whole eugenics complex originates in the United States of America with all the shining lights of science, both behavioral, social, scientific, and the hard sciences, the biology, the emerging field of biology. You know that. So I'm not going to go through that to any length. I'm just going to assume that you have a background. If not, go ahead and go to those sites that talks about Margaret Sanger and all these other people. There's tons of books now. It's no longer a conspiracy theory to understand this. There's tons of academic literature and people even lecture on it, except perhaps for women in gender studies, because that's their skeleton in the closet. That's where they originate, and they can't go back there like a dog back to its vomit because it's smelly and it's noxious, but that's where it comes from. And I'm mentioning this because a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today has migrated over into the women and gender studies and then various offshoots of that. There's something called performance studies, which has supplanted theater and drama because that includes men, women, and everybody else, but performance only is supposed to be for gay, transgender, lesbian. New York University is one of the sites of it. So, in other words, this particular series of innovations that really started in Prussia have migrated into these different academic disciplines to the point where we have now probably at least two generations of undergraduates who've gone through college and university who've absorbed this information, and they think this is reality. They think because they haven't been presented an alternative. I tried. I got away with it for about 10 years until they They meaning the administration. My colleagues wanted to get me out of there really quickly because they wanted to get their wife a job or their boyfriend or something, or put queer studies in there or something, because I'm quote unquote heteronormative, and that's not fashionable in the academic world. But the administration finally caught up because I started connecting the history of science and what the University of California was involved with, including my own home campus, the University of California, Davis, which is involved with animal experimentation, human experimentation, agricultural experimentation, engineering. They're part of this re-engineering process that started with the early American/Prussian collaborative effort. And in the course of this, I think people who are watching the show are advanced enough to know that all this is leading to the post-human reality that the big boys and girls have workshopped for the past 70 years, perhaps even earlier than that, you might say. Whatever timeline you want to observe, it's consensus that we are heading, even amongst the opposition, right, and amongst us. It's a consensus that this is the direction. It's announced. That's the Great Reset. There's all different types of euphemisms and phrases that have been shoved in our face. And everything that we've seen up here to this point in early 2021 has been sort of a test, a probe to see how much the American and the larger world population are going to put up with this science, in quotation mark, this Luciferian practice in the guise of science. It's Pan. It's the god Pan. That's why I call it. This is a pun. Pan means not just wide and broad and all inclusive, but I'm also invoking this idea of Pan, the pagan god, right? It's a really good book of witchcraft. It's a popular book. It's not an academic one. It draws from academic sources, though, which, as I've told you already, is academia in certain quarters of it is beginning to revisit this literature here because they realize the bankruptcy of so-called big theory, literary theory, normlessness, and in fact, GLBTQ English and comparative literature endowments. People have these endowed chairs who are really post-humans, writing about cyborgs and robots and AI and a sexless, genderless world. Okay, those people are on their way out. They don't even know it. They have the seeds of their own destruction were sown in their work. Ironically, life is full of ironies. You gotta love it. So anyway, it's in the popular literature here. Here's a nice illustration of the god Pan. Pan teaching the infant Olympus to play the pipes. Oh yeah, there's a sort of an adult child motif here, such as we see at the after parties of the elite, such as at the super irritable ball. I'm sure there were many Pans running around with the infant Olympus trying to teach them how to play the pipes. I'm reading here. The Greek god of the wild, Pan, provided many of the iconographic characteristics of the devil, and modern occultists choose him as a symbol of opposition to Christ and Christianity. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. So it's in the popular literature. Oh, before I forget, we were talking about vampires in there. Vampires are also, and the vampiric are also, as I mentioned last time, a product of Victorian society, which was grappling with the resurgence of Luciferianism and Satanism in their own culture, right? They call the satanic mills of industry, the Industrial Revolution, the enslavement of children, of minorities within the budding British Empire, the Age of Victorian, the Welsh, the Irish, the Scots, the English working class, right? The conditions that spawned British socialism, including the Tavistock people, your elite socialists, your George Bernard Shaw, your Leonard Woolf, Virginia Woolf, all those people. The society was debased to such an extent that socialism had fairly fertile ground in which to implant its demonic seed. And we're still seeing the the continuity of that with Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of Britain, right? He pretended he was a floppy-haired, good old boy by British standards instead of a toff, an elite, educated individual who showed his true colors eventually. So we're talking about a global system. But before I move on, I just wanted to introduce another fairly good book by Kevin Sullivan, The Vampire, The Richard Chase Murders. And this is of a special interest to me because this took place right in my backyard. I have driven many times by Watt Street. It's a commercial area with a lot of shopping centers. There's a regional shopping center called Arden Fair Mall that's barely hanging on. I think all the anchor stores have disappeared. Sears is gone, and I don't know. I haven't been there in a while. But he was right on my turf, and I just mentioned this in passing because I wanted to remind you that we're probably going to be seeing some of these incidents cropping up fairly soon. We're going to see the news cycle being filled with a serial killer or a spree killer, in addition to false flags. I think the spree killer is probably even more scary than the false, because when the false flag is over, it's over, right? Then they put together, the government put together all these bogus commissions to investigate it for years and years. But the serial killer, these types of people, your Philip Garridos, inspire everyday, ordinary, 24-hour-a-day terror. And I'll give you, I've isolated to 4. There's probably more if you can add to this, but there's 4 giveaways where these crimes tend to take place. Tend, not always, but tend to take place. Number 1, they always seem to be near a university research hospital. Yes, like the Harvard Medical Center, right? Boston General. I don't know where Whitey Bulger, I guess it's pronounced, the Irish-American mafia don. I don't know where he got his treatment. Sometimes they're in prisons, but if you're out of prison, it's usually a university research hospital. We have one here at UC Davis Medical Center. In the downtown area. By the way, it's not part of the campus. The center is in the ghetto area. Why? Didn't I just allude to human experimentation? That's where the indigent go, and the immigrant people and the underclass goes there to get government subsidized medical care. And that's also the place. UC Davis Medical Center is where one of the shining lights in medical research had, and his associates, a few associates, look this up if you don't believe me, had to be dismissed. I don't think he spent any prison time, but he was dismissed for doing neurosurgery involving fecal matter being put into people's brains, right? I mean, these scenarios are not as infrequent as you might imagine. So if you're near a university research hospital, watch out. They have the perfect guys, right? They're serving the community. They're also, these individuals typically function near major military bases, right? The reason there is obvious. They subsidize most of this research at the university, number 1. And secondly, they have all this aircraft that can transport people, sex slaves, dope, armaments, you name it. So near a major military, and this fits the Sacramento profile perfectly. That's why we have so many of them in this area, Philip Garrido and this guy, Richard Chase. Richard Trenton Chase, in case there's a Richard Chase out there. I don't want to confuse him with Richard Trenton case. Also, these individuals typically have received psychiatric treatment in an institutional setting. That's true with Richard Trenton case. He thought, just like Philip Garrido, he thought he was going crazy and schizophrenic. So, and I'm not imputing any sort of malign medical protocols that were being used on these individuals, but they tend to go together. There's a psychiatric research program typically running in parallel with these people who are running around to supposedly at random, right? And number 4, They're typically near an FBI and CIA regional offices. I guess it saves them drive time. They can just kind of monitor the situation right out their window. And that's true here in Sacramento. It's in Los Angeles as well. In New York, all the major cities have field offices that house these quote unquote law enforcement entities, which we found out recently. The leadership does not work for the American people. The rank and file do, but the leadership does not. Okay, also in keeping with today's talk, and this is going to have to be a two-parter rather, because I'm going to update this sort of historic look or historical backstory exercise today. I'm going to finish up with latter-day manifestations in keeping with our Valentine's Day, Valentine's Week motif. I'll be talking about a little bit about Ashley Madison. That's that site where people who are married can go there to, cheat. And it's found. I taught a course in sexuality as well, and Ashley Madison was just coming out, and it grew explosively. And then there's one I think it's called sugardaddy.com, which is fairly interesting. It's about men of wealth who are looking for women, or maybe men, I don't know. It's a website. And then there's all these other dating apps that you know more about than I do, but I think this is an area of study that both of us can collaborate on because it's part of our world. And I would argue it's even an extension or one of the spokes on the wheel of this post-gender, post-sexual, or maybe it's the last vestige of the old regime. I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. But there's a lot of material out there that you and I need to look in. And I'm especially interested in your relationship to these dating apps or these services. I'm working on trying to get a phone situation set up where I can take the phones and we can do a live stream. You can tell me all about your success or your failures on sugardaddy.com or Ashley Madison. I want to know this. So I'm working on that, and my Patreon supporters are helping me out to get the hardware. It's not cheap to do it, but I think it's an important effort that needs to be undertaken because it's not being done at the so-called research institutions. And we could do it amongst ourselves and come up with much more interesting results as well. Okay, I caught you up there. We've got the global pedophile ring busted in Germany. You know about that. Check out the articles. It was based in Germany, but there were people round up in Britain. I don't know about in the United States. It's for the most part suppressed in the U.S. news. You know the reasons why, hopefully, or you can infer them without me having to go into it. So let me first start with our talk here with a foundational article, because you know this, but it's really nice to see the old-fashioned typescript and the original article where the scholars and all the plagiarists who are out there on YouTube have talked about, the Rockefeller Foundation and the Kaiser Wilhelm. They discovered the moon. So this has been going on for decades. But I'm going to post this, by the way. This is not something that you're going to get from your standard YouTubers, because, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Hamamoto is further upstream than the poseurs who are the YouTube experts on the occult and the metaphysical and all the other woo-woo information, right? So this particular article, it's an announcement, was published in 1936, and it's published by a journal, the American Association for the Advancement of Science. These are scientists. They take their charge seriously. They're true believers, just like the ones that are creating our AI and enhanced reality or augmented reality, Second Life universe, take themselves deadly serious. Deadly is the operative word there. So here's the headline. I'm not going to read it all. It says, the Rockefeller Foundation and the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. The New York Times reports that the Rockefeller Foundation has granted $655,000. That's American. This is back in 1936, man. That's a lot of bucks. That's a lot of dollars to the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. Okay, now you know. There it is. Here's the document. This is where all the books by Edmund Black, who's good, by the way. He's a great author. The people that you're reading in the other circles are they're plagiarizing Edwin Black's work for the most part. And they don't cite him, they don't credit him, and that's not cool. They're passing it off in their own work and getting paid on it as well. Yeah, I'm also a target of plagiarism, but knock yourself out, because I think the information here is more important than me or my reputation, my scholarly reputation. So anyway, it goes on here. It mentions some names that the plagiarists have not gone into. They'll talk to you about, Margaret Sanger and all the same old. But how many of you know who Fritz Haber is? Haber. You don't. He's a chemical engineer. And by the way, chemical engineers were really the granddaddies of all the eugenics and the sciences and the laboratory experimental sciences. And they were doing their work long before Adolf Aloysius Hitler ever showed up. And I mention this because, it says in the title here, the American/Prussian origins of Pan-Sexuality. And I put the Prussian in there purposely because one of the big lies, and I think it's intentional, because we have to make the wartime German people into monsters. People who were living under the Third Reich, most of whom were not Nazis, by the way. Most of the military were not Nazis, but we call them Nazi. We call it Nazi Germany. It's like calling America Biden Germany, Biden America. Most of us are not Bidenites, and most of us didn't even vote for him. So that's very. Although Adolf Hitler was voted into power, because I guess it was more of a plebiscite than an actual vote. And who knows? Maybe he, if there was internet, he would be president of the United States today. So I'll post this on my Patreon here. There's an announcement in this journal. It's the Science Journal, by the way. That's 1930, which is still in publication. And this is the gold standard journal for not just the U.S. and Britain, but for much of the world. It's interesting here. There's a little announcement here. The Fraudulent Academy of Science. Oh, they have some little infighting here. They got some competition going here. Yeah, we want to encourage that. We want to encourage infighting amongst these wankers. Just like the mischievous Pan, the fawn. He's kind of a clown, kind of a jester, as well as being an archetype of fertility and seduction and sensuality, right? That's our friend, Pan, the goddess, the god Pan. Okay, so let me move on. I'm going to present you some information here that you can tell all your friends about. Let me see here. Where is it? Yeah. Most of you who are looking at the plagiarists on YouTube do not know that it was not just America and Germany. Let's see here. Here's the article. I go to the source. I'm upstream here. Okay. It was also the Soviet Union. Okay. They're not innocent bystanders in this whole process. And I think some of this was also going into Japan, but the Japanese scientists were going primarily to Berlin at the time, Germany, and learning it there. And then they took it back there. So these were the major centers of eugenics, what's now called eugenics science. So here's an article. It's called Human Heredity in Politics. Really good one. And it says a comparative institutional study of the Eugenics Records Office at Cold Spring Harbor. You know this. Those of you who watch this have been there. You know what the location, right? You know about Watson and Cold Spring Harbor and eugenics and Watson of IBM fame, right? And you know about we talked about the Kaiser Wilhelm, and you know that already. But do you know about the Maxim Gorky Medical Genetics Institute in the USSR? No, you don't. I didn't know this. Maxim Gorky Medical Genetics Institute. So it seems that these authoritarian total governments have something in common. They hate the people who live within their national borders. And that's true with the United States of America. Our so-called leadership, they despise us. We're nothing but scum to them. It doesn't matter what nationality you are, you're scum. Okay, so so let's bring in the USSR to this discussion. Let's stop talking about Nazi Germany. Let's talk about the Prussian, right? This is a monarchy still, and they were leading the world in this site. And then of course comes Weimar, the short-lived Weimar Republic, and that's when it really gets good. And then Hitler kind of comes in and reaps the benefits of all. He comes in and says, "Oh yeah, all these scientists, they're brilliant. Yeah, they got a great education as part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Gymnasium." In physics and electronic engineering and genetics, state-of-the-art stuff. And also, you have to understand that many of the most prominent scientists within Prussian Germany who laid the foundation for this were Jews, scientists, okay? So that's one of the reasons why the timeline is dicked with, and they say, oh, it's a German thing, it's a Nazi thing. No, it came out of Prussia. And Jews themselves scientists were complicit in creating this infrastructure, as well as ethnic Germans, and there were some ethnic Poles and brilliant people from all over the place, but mostly Germans, of Protestant, Lutheran, maybe Catholic faiths as well, right? So here's a great article that was published recently. It's a historical look backwards. It was in a chemical engineering journal, 2003, and it says that there's a Kaiser Wilhelm Institute that's going to be a division or an extension of it that's going to be placed in Cologne or Köln, right? This is in 2003. So guess what? The Kaiser Wilhelm Institute never went away. It carried over into the post-war period. And it spawned such, and I'll get to this in a moment, such fellow or brother or sister institution as the Max Planck Institute, right? So we have figures like Emil Fischer and the Konrad Adenauer and a scientist named Myrowski who were involved here. See, Nobel Prize for chemistry was given to Emil Fischer. I'm sure he was into coal tar dyes, right? That's where the chemistry comes in. This is where all the poison gas and all the biowarfare that we're seeing today. Yeah, we have the better living through chemistry people to thank for that. And I don't really mean thanks. We curse you for misusing your brilliance and your intellect just to advance yourself. So here, 1911, which is when the Kaiser Wilhelm Gesellschaft was created, and that was during the time of Kaiser Wilhelm, right? So I think I'll post this article as well on my Patreon. You'll find it interesting and exciting and important. Okay, here we get to another figure that you don't know about because this is not plagiarized material. This is original upstream material that the YouTubers haven't, or the popularizers haven't really discussed. And it shows you the extent, the enormity of this system that was all embracing. By that, all the scientists of all ethnicities and religious backgrounds, people with the advanced degrees were involved in this unicum, this monolithic scientific. There were some dissenters, of course. We don't know many of them, or who they are. I'd like to read their histories and why they walked away from material success and the kudos and even the Nobel Prizes that are awarded to individuals who inflict misery on humanity. How many of you know the name of Professor Eugen Fischer, right, of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology, Human Heredity, and Eugenics? Remember, they were involved in the social sciences. Your anthropology, your human heredity, they all are considered together under this umbrella, which was funded, as you heard earlier in this talk, to the tune of 665,000 American dollars, and that would go a long way in the Germany of this time. Because of inflation and economic crisis. So yeah, the Rockefellers knew what they were doing. They're spreading money around, just like all the money's being spread around right now to consolidate all the vectors, the network of power that are going to bring us into the AI, enhanced reality, post-human world, right? The foundations, there you go. So Eugen Fischer's 1874, get this, to 1967. Yes, he was living all the way through what was, the Beatle era, right? The counterculture. He had a long life. That's one thing that these characters seem to have in common. They live a long time. David Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, Heinz Kissinger, right? He's going to live to be 150. You wait, you watch. Because they got the real medical science on going for them, right? So he was, he's a Nobel Prize winner, and this is a sort of a history of the this article, the academic article, talks about the pre-Nazi past, 1927, 1933. It was so well developed and so entrenched before Adolf Hitler ever showed up. All right, just keep that in mind. And same way here in the U.S. Okay, let's briefly talk about the Max Planck Institute for Molecular Genetics. All right, here's an article. Again, let's not knock academia totally, right? And I know that was the goal, to take the attention off of the real legitimate research by just putting Trigglypuff up there, or all the trigger warning people, or all the social justice, where it was to distract us from the useful work that's going on there, and the important work, and the under-recognized contributions that scholars all over the world, especially the United States of America, are doing. Okay, so here's an example of this. This is a journal that's called Medizin Historisches Journal. It's a German publication in Stuttgart, Germany, published in 2011. Okay, let's not talk about German war guilt. These people have published tons about Nazi medicine. They've done it, I mean, it's never complete, but they've done a lot of it. And the same goes for Japan. There's a lot of guilt tripping about the Japanese. They never really could reconcile themselves to this is Iris Chang's formulation, the rape of a non-gene, which, by the way, was written and sponsored by the People's Republic of China. Again, not to disparage her efforts or her contributions and the importance of it, but largely to take focus over Mao Zedong and Maoism and the 70 million people that died under that particular regime by display, changing the timeline and emphasizing a different aspect of society that helps the contemporary authoritarian regimes. So these authors, or one author, Carola Sasha, talks about the Max Planck Institute as being an offshoot of the Kaiser Wilhelm. And I'm running out of time, so I'm going to move ahead, because I got the real original stuff's coming up. So hang on to your belt here, because I promised you to talk about the origins of pansexualism, of transgenderism, post-sexualism, right? These are all, I call it pansexualism. This is the big this is the big promise that I made to you today, and I'm going to get to it right now. Okay. And I'll skip over some of the other material that I had prepared for you. Let me speak to contemporary time. And by that, I mean 1950, post-war 50s through the present. And I also promise you a UC Davis connection, right? Well, the connection comes in the form of Professor Hermann Spieth. And despite the German family name he has, he's German-American. He was raised in the Midwest, in the agricultural Midwest. And he was a pioneer in agricultural research. And I mention this is because the agricultural infrastructure and the large animal industry and husbandry was part of the eugenics program. That's not often recognized. I forgot to mention this. This is my contribution here. Well, it's not my contribution, it's my emphasis that's forgotten, because we talk about Margaret Sanger and human eugenics, but messing with crops and messing with large animals and herd animals, food supply for a lot of us, was part and parcel with that whole project. And if you heard me in other venues and previous talks, you know that I've been looking at the agricultural colleges and the Morrill Land Grant Act that brought in the universities to wed with the military. And the agricultural schools, I would argue, are at least as important, if not more so, than the marquee names of the medical schools and the MIT, the physics departments that get all the glory and all the celebrity worship. It's the humble agricultural schools that really was where the action is. So here's a case in point. Professor Hans Spieth at the University of California, he opened up the University of California Riverside Agricultural Station. That's in Southern California. It's outside of Los Angeles, in case you didn't know. That's the Southern Agricultural Station for the University of California. And the northern component station is the University of California, Davis, where I taught for over 20 years. So Spieth had experience at both campuses. He was kind of like the Johnny Appleseed of modern agricultural science, wed to the military and soon to be the NATO experience, and also the nuclear warfare. Right, these institutions were also involved with weapons of mass extermination. UC Davis, as you know, was the home campus of Professor Edward Teller, who, by the way, comes from this milieu that I've spoken of, but because he was Hungarian Jew, he had to leave there and come to the United States. Otherwise, if it had been for Hitler, he would have plied his profession there, but he came to the U.S. and continued on with his quest to harness nuclear energy and hydrogen weaponry, right? You know the story. So that's Spieth at the University of California, and he was, and there's a connection here. Well, again, I'll get into a moment. He was a specialist in Drosophila. Drosophila. Say that, Drosophila. That's a Latin word. We know that as the fruit fly, right? And I mention this is because the Drosophila comes up time and time again in the experimental literature. They're even more common than rat experiments as primate experiments because they reproduce very quickly. So he was a specialist there. And also, according to his bio, Professor Spieth used to spend his summers at Cold Spring Harbor, which tells me that he was part of this larger network. And here he was. I mean, he was long retired by the time I showed up, but he's part of my institutional history because the UC continues with its research agenda to enslave humanity. They do a little some community work and benefit society at large, but their larger agenda is very much wedded with the United Nations and NATO, the World Health Organ. I was going to say World Whore Organization, but I'll let that stand. That's really what their charge is in their mandate. And that's how I used to lecture. This is what I would tell our undergraduates when I taught them there. And they were horrified. They said, "Oh, you're ruining my future." Well, guess what? You don't have a future now. The university's closed down. And the society's closing down. Yeah. So, I don't know. I tried. Okay. You might have heard of the Drosophila, the fruit fly, in another context. And this, I missed it for the first time around, the first several times around, because that was very interesting. I told you I taught a course in human sexuality, and the name Alfred Kinsey, you got to go through him, right? And I knew this, but I finally realized that the fact that Alfred Kinsey was not a psychologist or behavioral science anthropologist, but a entomologist, didn't really register except for some notion that, he likes to experiment with bugs. He considers us, we human beings like insects, but it's deeper than that. And I'm so grateful that I've made this connection. Yes, Professor Alfred Kinsey, or Alfred Kinsey, was a Drosophila expert. He did his dissertation on that, and he's connected to that. And why is that important? Let me skip to that part right now. It's really interesting, and I'm also running out of time. What I found just within the last 18 hours, right? Because I've been researching this like mad for the past 2 days. But what I found the patterns. That's what I'm an expert in. I found that the humble fruit fly, the Drosophila, is really at the center of an entire re-engineering of the human species, what I call Pan-Sexuality, right? The people in women and genders studies in the social justice warriors call it GLBTQ, and on and on and on. I call it Pan-Sexuality because then, you don't have to deal with all them alphabet letters. You just call it Pan-Sexuality. Yes, the humble fruit fly, the Drosophila fruit fly, is responsible for that through decades and decades of experimentation that continue to the very day, the very present. Let's bring into the discussion a Nobel Prize winner, a name that you have not heard from the plagiarists on YouTube. His name is Professor Adolf Butenandt. That's Butenandt. Born 1903. Yeah, he was born in the age of the Kaiser, right? He was a Prussian, born, I don't know if he was born in Prussia, but he was of the Prussian era, right? And guess when he died? He died in 1995. That's not that long ago. He had a long life. The bad live well and long. He must have had access to all the good stuff, right? And I credit Professor Adolf Butenandt with being the inventor of Pan-Sexuality. I know it was a larger community effort, but if there's one person that we can use as the symbol, or what used to be called the poster child, they don't longer have poster childs because the March of Dimes realized it had become a cultural joke, right? And disparagement. But anybody who, if you want to point to one figure who was the inventor of Pan-Sexuality, we would have to talk about Adolf Butenandt. So remember his name, okay? Remember, because we're taking it forward now. You learn something in today's talk that advances the storehouse of knowledge, not just in teaching you his name, but also giving you an indication of his contribution and why the world itself is becoming re-engineered to become genderless, right? Becoming queer or gay was only the beginning. That was just a movement to test and to probe the public receptivity and to change the laws and the customs and the mores of the society as a portal to introduce the post-human realities that were workshopped early on in the Prussian era with the funding of the American eugenicists, who had as their big problem how to get rid of the indigenous people, the slave population. All these Asian immigrants come from China and Japan, all the Poles, all the Hungarians, the Slavic types, the Jews. Oh my gosh, man, we got to do something about these people. So Butenandt was one of the pioneers here. Let me give you an idea of Professor Butenandt's contributions here. Let's see here. First of all, let me read. let's start at the end. These guys do die eventually, but so let's start. Let's read it from his bio. His epitaph, his obituary, which was published in the New York Times. You have to be somebody to get your obit published there. Here's the headline: Adolf Butenandt is dead at 91. Juan Nobel for hormone work. That's the key word, hormone. He was dicking with the human hormones decades ago through his entire career. And guess how they figured out who these people, when I say these scientists, right? American, Prussian, Japanese, Russian, all the nationalities who were involved, but Germans and Austrians had, they were the genius in this particular area, right? All the money went over there, courtesy of John D. Rockefeller, right? The hormones and the pheromones and all of that was discovered through the experimentation of the Drosophila with Kinsey. So I realized that Kinsey was not just trying to do a survey of human behavior, sexual behavior in the human male. Then he did a companion volume, the sexuality in the human female, right? And by the way, I can spend a whole talk talking about just dealing with the fake research that he did. It's beyond flawed. It's a criminal what he got away with. But he was not only writing these books and doing all the surveys of prisoners and prostitutes and extrapolating from that, but he was involved in this vision of creating a post-gender, what I call a pansexual society. So his connection with the Drosophila, to me, allowed the coin to drop, saying that was his larger agenda. It wasn't just creating promiscuousness or defeating laws against morality, public and private, and some of those needed to go, by the way. I'm in agreement with that. But that was part of his political agenda. That was his advocacy work. But his larger legacy was in moving us closer to this post-human world, Alfred Kinky. And when I say kinky, I'm it's funny, but just very briefly, he had graduate students around them, and him and his wife, they were swingers. They were pansexual expressionists. They were male and female. I know he was pansexual. I think he was what they called back then an invert, but later on they were called bisexual. Now they're just called you and me, right? But he would have his grad students come up to the Kinsey household, and he had the archives, and he had state-of-the-art cameras, and he had a cameraman, and he had people doing the charts and all that. And they would, have dinner and drink, and then go up to the attic and have sex, have group sex, and all the tapes, the films would be going. And supposedly all that is housed at the University of Indiana, where he taught. There's a Kinky Institute is still there. And I don't know if the films are there. I'd sure like to maybe I'll present my academic credentials and ask for the secret access. I think you probably have to be a Rockefeller, someone who gives the big bucks, in order to see the real archives. But anyway, it's a thought. So that's Butenandt. Let me look at some other pieces here that I found. Some of them are in German. Butenandt, Nobel Prize for Chemistry. This is a Mayo Clinic puff piece, and of course they're pro Butenandt instead of him being a crime against humanity. Here's an old article from a professor in 1940, right? This is just right before the U.S. Entered World War II in Pacific and Europe. But Ralph Usper, I guess he's a professor, University of Cincinnati, Ohio. Alfred Butenandt, it's a glowing review in 1940. Vitamins, hormones, and enzymes stand at the very center of modern biochemistry. Wow, they were talking about way back then. The significance of these active materials was well characterized on one occasion by Alfred Butenandt when he declared that they form the basis of a metabolism of a higher order. That was his phrase. What is that higher order? I think that higher order he's referring to is Lucifer. I think that higher order is symbolized in the god Pan. That's a very strong suspicion that I have, and it's anti-Christian, and it's goes back to the heathen, the pagan tradition that the Third Reich really got into as well. So he's right at home. And there was a mild controversy about I don't know if he was a party member, but he worked through the Third Reich, and he did research for them. But there was a controversy whether a former Third Reich scientist should be given the Nobel Prize. But I think he managed to overcome that. Here's one. Ernährung und Ausblendung ein kritischer Blick in den Briefwechsel Adolf Buchanas, MPG, President 1969. He was the president of a science society in the post-war period. So I guess being a Third Reich scientist really was a good career move for him, because he was rewarded with all these honorifics, as well as prestigious positions, and including the Nobel Prize for chemistry. Okay, let me return briefly, because we know about the human breeding and the post-human agenda that's well in place now, but let me reaffirm a very important point. One of the themes in my own research on New World Order theory. There's a whole book here. Let's see, 241 pages that I found, written by Susanne Heim. I don't know if she's German or not. I think she is a German national, but this is in English. The title is Plant Breeding. Got it? Got the phrase? Plant Breeding and Agrarian Research in Kaiser Wilhelm Institutes, 1933, which is when Nazi Germany begins, right, to 1945, all through the war. Plant Breeding and Agrarian Research. Calories, Cahutek, Career. That's the subtitle. Okay, so that just, I'm reminding you, plant breeding, which means genetic engineering, that means Monsanto, that means the Terminator seeds for maize, for corn that were shipped over to Mexico, right? And the person who discovered that, who at UC Berkeley, was denied tenure, and then my attorney had to go to bat for him. He did get a tenure, but his career's over. He's never going to get another research grant, because he's not producing the type of work that Monsanto wants to know about. So, okay, so plant breeding and agrarian research includes large animals, because my contention is that we are going to be seeing, as part of these false flags and the serial killers who are going to be set loose from the behavioral science departments in order to extend Operation Chaos 2.0. We know that happened during the 60s, right? It didn't end when Annie Jacobsen says, yeah, I wrote several books on this, her and her team, right, her research team. And so it's over. No. It's just beginning. Or as the Carpenter said, we've only just begun. Let's see here. Let me see what else is other contribution here. Okay. Again, Buchanan is so important, but here's another time. This is an academic article. Okay, it's published in Studies of Historical Philosophy, Biology, and Biomedicine Science, published 2005. And it's part of a series, Studies in the History and Philosophy of Biological and Biomedical Science. This material is available to you, but you're distracted by teaching assistants out there saying, yeah, we're going to beat up all you MAGA individuals, right? Big distraction. Here's the article. This tells you why my claim, I think, holds water, right? Adolf Buchanan is the father of pansexuality, transgenderism, transsexualism, and even really the theoretician, as well as the prelude of what now is almost a routine gender reassignment surgery. Yes, all the articles you want to read in the surgery journals, the academic journals, there's tons of them on sex reassignment surgery, and all of them take it for granted that this is desirable, except for one article that I came up with. I won't go into right now. So there are some dissenters. We have to find who they are and work with them. Here's the article that helps to reinforce my claim that Professor Adolf Buchanan is the father of pan-sexuality. Here's the main article title I don't understand. It says, better prepared than synthesized. Here's the subtitle always is the giveaway. Alfred Buchanan Sharing AG, that's the company, I guess a private company, and the transformation of sex steroids into drugs, 1930 to 1946. So he was, even before Hitler came into power, right, full power in 1930, he was already doing experimentation and probably putting it out there ahead of time in sex steroids. And this, for me, helps explain why Weimar Germany, right, the period of Republican Germany right before Hitler took power, why it was and especially Berlin was the hotbed of all manner of sexual deviance and decadence and licentiousness, cross-dressing human beings, maybe even transsexuals, right? It was documented in a series of short stories by Christopher Isherwood, who I've talked about before, when he visited there with his other gay British literary people to Berlin. It was like going to Tijuana. It was cheap sex. You can do everything. Life is a cabaret, my friend, right? You saw the movie with Joel Grey. Yeah, I mean, that was based on Christopher Isherwood's Berlin stories. Now I understand why sexuality in Weimar Germany was such that it is, because you had scientists who were already re-engineering a German society, and they were really kind of laying the framework or the seedbed, so to speak. Let's say they were laying the road for Hitler to roll in on, because one of his big promises to the German people is that he was going to clean up Berlin. He was going to encourage men and women to be together and to father healthy children. He was against smoking. He was a health nut. He was a vegetarian, right? But at the same time, you had this legacy going back to Prussia of these scientists who were already engaged in this type of research, right? I don't know. I suspect, and I'm not a fan of Adolf Hitler, don't get me wrong, but I suspect that Adolf Hitler and some of his top-level advisors were trying to get rid of these people because they realized it was destroying Germany and Austria. It was destroying a Western civilization purposely, right? This biochemical re-engineering of the human race was demonic, was satanic. And so he went in the other direction to glorify the Aryan ideal, the hyper-masculine, the ones that's being resurged. There's a resurgence in Germany in the group that I mentioned the other day, Rammstein, right? These oil greased, magnificent Greco-Roman idealized bodies, right? A Triumph of the Will, Olympiad, Leni Riefenstahl. I think that was a reaction to these mad scientists who come out of Prussia and Weimar Germany, who had been charged with the responsibility of the Rockefeller Foundation and the evil geniuses in America to remake the human race, even back then, so that all these problematic weed people, the mud people, would be reigned over and ruled by the true elect in the world, the Übermenschen. Right. So we have to rewrite the history of the Third Reich. My discoveries here is a historiographic revolution, and you're part of it. You're witnessing it. This is the first time I debuted. I'm doing it all the way live just for you, because you are my research partners in this. You know why? Because they are targeting you and me for elimination, right? And that's why we're celebrating Valentine's Day. By the way, if you invert it, that supposedly is the glans penis, because Pan is a generative god. He's usually portrayed, I didn't put it on the site because I didn't want to offend anybody who believes that I'm just being pornographic, right? But Pan is usually depicted in the Greco-Roman time, the pagan era, with an erect penis, right? The glans penis. So there you go. You learn something. When you go to your Valentine party this Sunday, you'll have something to talk about that goes beyond, hey, you want to watch Netflix and chill? Isn't that what how dating goes these days for the younger set? Netflix and chill, yeah, do it. I'm running out of time here. Let me take some questions. I have to continue this next time because I have some more on Butanand. But hormones, pheromones, behavior, incel, involuntary celibacy, all of the low testosterone. That's supposed to be epidemic. Yeah, LSD, low sex drive, low testosterone. You got to take testosterone shots. You got to go to the UC Davis Medical Center to get some shots of testosterone because it's been milked out of your system, right, for decades now. Nutritionally, you name it. I'm going to do a whole section on the fast food industry, which I relate back down to the Kaiser Wilhelm industry or institute and the Kaiser Wilhelm Gesellschaft. It's all very much related there. It all kind of kicked in the post-war period when men with testosterone had to be eliminated because they could vie for power and control over the Rockefellers and these Saxe-Coburg, right, which is the House of Windsor, and all these hereditary banker elites that have been enslaving us and giving money to all these scientists to create these technologies of enslavement. And we have been enslaved psychosexually and biochemically. And by gosh, we're going to celebrate Valentine's Day. In spite of this, I want everybody who's watching here or later to have a big O at midnight on Valentine's Day. Everybody at the same time. Boy, what vibrations that'll create, right? What performance art. Yes, sirree, the big O. I don't mean the big O tire stores. I mean the other big O. We're going to do the big O in defiance of all these people who want us to mask up and mutilate ourselves and to huddle and cower in fear. Yeah, the big O. Yeah, we're going to do it on Valentine's Day. Yes, sirree. Peace out, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see you later on Thursday. Thank you very much for joining me. Hey, hi, Corky. Oswald Spengler is in the house. Derek Holmes, Dawn Mazia, B-Tot. Thank you very much for being here and share all this. And boy, you're in for a really good one on Thursday as well, because I'm only just starting. Because Valentine's Day doesn't start till Sunday. All right, we're all going to have a big O. Okay, thank you. You can start now. You have to wait till Sunday. You can start now. Start without me. Okay, bye.